It had been nearly a week since Tyrion had last seen the Grand Maester. The less they saw of each other, the better, lamented Tyrion. It wasn't that he disliked the scholar of the Citadel. Compared to Pycelle, Grand Maester Ebrose was practically charming company. Still, Tyrion had a certain reluctance with meeting a man who was privy to his darkest secrets and political failings such as losing the damned king. Tyrion was escorted to his laboratory by Ser Jericho. It was a rare occasion when Tyrion departed the Holdfast without his chosen member of the King's Guard. Once outside the laboratory, Tyrion simply nodded to Ser Jericho, implying his desire for privacy. Tyrion entered without announcement. He noted every horizontal space crammed with dusty books and notes. Ebrose was obviously deep inside his own research. Tyrion was tempted to ask why, but his curiosity would just lead to another matter for him to lose sleep over. Tyrion had felt a fool before, but it seemed to be happening more often than usual. He would ponder what happened, what changed that made him less of a formidable political opponent. He often wondered if he had put his best foot forward while in service to the Dragon Queen. That was the first time he had started to doubt himself. Daenerys had never seen his best. He had been outmaneuvered by what he considered to be inferior opponents. Sansa once offered that Tywin's death had changed Tyrion. Perhaps she had a point. Tyrion knew that under Tywin's protection, he would never see the consequences of his own reckless actions. Up until the time Tywin himself became a consequence. With his death, Jaime and Cersei weren't the only ones to lose the protection of the Lion, but Tyrion as well. Somewhere deep in his subconsciousness, Tyrion knew he no longer held Tywin's protection. That itself was the reason for Tyrion's political ineptitude. The loss of a shield leads to a timid warrior. That is where Tyrion had failed. He had become politically timid, knowing his father could not protect him from his own recklessness.
To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure, my Lord Hand?
Tyrion was pulled from his own daydream by the Grand Maester. Normally, when caught off guard, Tyrion would reach for the nearest pitcher of wine. A slow pour would offer him just the moment he would require to collect his thoughts. But alas, the Grand Maester embraced sobriety.
Good evening, Grand Maester. Would it be too bold of me to ask for a moment of your time?
Considering you have already invited yourself in, it would be equally rude of me to refuse you, my lord.
The Grand Maester barbed. Tyrion was not in the mood to trade blows intellectually. He had more important matters to discuss. Still, the absence of drink did more to unnerve Tyrion than the matter of discussion.
Allow me to relieve you of the indignity of manufacturing an excuse for your arrival this afternoon. You wish to discuss the king, do you not?
Ebrose inquired directly. Tyrion agreed that was precisely the reason for his visit, but would not offer that satisfaction to the Grand Maester. Tyrion simply nodded and allowed Ebrose to continue, as he was obviously keen to.
I have just returned from the king's chamber, and do you dare to reckon what I had found?
Tyrion just closed his eyes reverently, knowing the scolding he would soon be receiving.
Just another bastard pretending to be a king. Except this one had full knowledge of the Hand's plot, just as if he was privy to our first conversations.
He was just a commoner that was outside the holdfast where I first informed you the king was missing. This man took us for his own advantage. I have agreed to place him in the drunkard's position of holding place until the heir is located.
A dangerous game you are playing, Lord Lannister. You now give the common man the leverage he needs to unstable the realm.
His requests were minimal, Grand Maester, I assure you.
For a time. Until the winery runs dry, or he speaks in front of the King's Guard. The bandages across his face will only conceal him for a time. Are you aware of who was accompanying him when Ser Jericho interrupted our exam?
Lord Tyrion was quite aware of who this false king preferred to have in his company, but Tyrion refused to admit it in front of his present company.
5. No less than 5 whores entertained our false king in front of the King's Guard. Is this what you meant when you desired a low profile?
Tyrion disregarded the Grand Maester's concerns and pleaded with him to see his own reason. He disregarded the Maester's concerns and quickly attempted to put all minds at ease.
Lady Yara was successful in Storm's End. The Dondarrions have agreed to muster a fleet in search of the princess. We must trust in their nautical abilities.
What I must do is inform the Citadel of the crisis we find ourselves in and convene the Board of Governors. Alas, I find myself in league with your plots. I will say this only once. Wrangle in this new impostor. No amount of wine or women will continue to conceal him. I am at the limits of my silence, my lord. Please see yourself out.
Tyrion felt ill as he joined with Ser Jericho. The knight appeared to notice the apprehension Tyrion was experiencing as they walked back to the holdfast.
My lord, I know it is not my place, but...
Then you should not speak, sir. But since you have already started, and I find myself short on allies, I would encourage you to continue, good sir.
The Princess of Dawn's maiden has requested an audience with you. Knowing who she is, I was reluctant to carry this message. Even more so, noting your irritants with the Grand Maester.
Tyrion sighed deeply. Of all the people in the capital, Tyrion was less enthusiastic to drink with. Tysha would rank just higher than Ebros himself.
She awaits in the holdfast for you, my lord.
Tyrion knew with the recent departure of Lady Sansa from the capital, Tysha would at the very least attempt a conversation. Tyrion remembered Cersei's last words to him. He regarded them as folly, but the lingering shred of truth left behind always nagged at the back of his mind. Ser Jericho dashed in front of the hand and opened the heavy double doors. Tyrion barely broke stride as he entered the holdfast. It was the most heavily guarded structure where the remaining lords and ladies kept since the flood of the city.
Good evening, my lord.
Tyrion finally found himself a pitcher. He poured a glass and drank deeply before responding. He then refilled the goblet before responding to his former wife.
I am told you requested an audience. Is this on behalf of the Princess of Dawn, or a more personal matter?
Dawn has no regard for our matters, my lord. I have been informed that the Septon of Lannisport is being interrogated by the Lord of Casterly Rock.
I fail to see why this should concern me, unless Lord Tyreek plans to make a whore his wife. Not unremarkable as a Lannister sometimes proceeds.
Tysha paused, digesting Tyrion's jest. She genuinely seemed wounded by the barb, but Tyrion knew this would not be the first time she had played a part well.
You deliberately misunderstand, my lord. The Septon is to testify that your father conspired to annul our marriage. This would be in defiance with the king's laws and would legalize our initial arrangement.
Tyrion stared longingly at her. The first woman he ever loved, perhaps the first ever to love him back, or so he thought. It's a special kind of torture, Tyrion thought. To have your feelings for someone shift violently from utopia to outright disdain. No human can ever be quite the same after experiencing such trauma. Tyrion would rather have his other cheek slashed or perhaps be burned at the stake than to have someone feign love for him again. Tragically, Tyrion still would lie to himself, assuming he knew the truth of what had transpired that day nearly 3 decades ago. The ugly truth was, Tyrion found himself ignorant in this regard. It tore at him every night since Tysha's reappearance, up until the time he drowned himself enough in his cups to properly forget. Tysha then cleared her throat to re-engage the conversation.
The lady is misinformed. I am properly wed, and my heir is set to inherit Casterly Rock. No testimony from a drunkard from Lannisport can change that.
Tyrion scolded as Tysha rose to her feet. Tyrion met her eyes and was surprised at what he read inside them. He expected to see fury or perhaps confidence, but what Tyrion saw was pity. How ironic it was that Tysha cast pity on him. It was enough to enrage Tyrion.
My lord, it is not a panel of judges or a king I intend to convince of the validity of our marriage, but that of your high-born illegitimate wife.
Tyrion felt a rage bubbling beneath him. It was similar to the evening he dragged a crossbow up to the Tower of the Hand.
I often wondered to what purpose would my former wife attempt to carry out in the capital. I am disappointed to say you had not formulated a better plan.
Tyrion barged through the door and Ser Jericho quickened his pace to keep up. Tyrion was nearly at a sprint through the halls of the Red Keep. Ser Jericho refused to speak or query regarding the Hand's pace of step. Tyrion skipped down the staircases that had recently been cleared of debris. Tyrion then shouted over his shoulder at Ser Jericho.
Lady Missandei, I need the acting master of laws.
Tyrion shouted as Ser Jericho struggled to keep up in full armor.
She was to meet with the king this afternoon. It is likely she is with him now.
Tyrion sighed heavily, knowing he would have to feign ignorance to the commoner posing as their king. This drunkard had overheard his initial conversation with Grand Maester Ebrose. The drunk had blackmailed Tyrion to take the king's place and keep Tyrion's secret as long as he was provided ample wine and women. For what reason the false king would be meeting with Missandei? This would signal the end of their bargain if he attempted to amend any of the king's laws. But why else would they meet? Tyrion entered the king's chamber as Ser Jericho announced his arrival. Lady Missandei rose to her feet and greeted the Hand.
My Lord Hand, the king still is not well, and unfortunately, still unable to speak.
Tyrion's eyes rolled so hard they nearly fell from his skull.
Of course he wouldn't be able. I would find it unfortunate if the king in his current state would suggest altering any of the current law. Perhaps we should refuse his further poppy to properly clear his mind before making any rash decisions.
The king moaned in an undignified manner. His head rocked side to side as his bandages still obscured his face. Tyrion often felt anyone who met with the king would also need to be brought into his circle, but Missandei seemed committed to ignoring any oddities.
No major changes have been suggested, my lord, but some of the suggestions make sense. Perhaps I could put together a presentation for your review.
That will not be necessary, milady. I'll confer with our dear king to ensure all changes of law come through my office, as I'm sure the king would agree.
Tyrion spat with a measured loathing.
I'll leave the two of you to it then, your grace.
Missandei bowed as she left the room and passed Ser Jericho. The false king continued to moan as if he was in pain until Tyrion smacked him across his face.
I've already committed treason leading you into this room. If you attempt to undermine me again, I'll personally strangle you in your sleep, and then sleep sounder myself.
Tyrion swept from the room and hurried to meet back with the newly christened Master of Laws.
Milady, I was hoping for a moment of your time.
Your meeting with his grace was short.
Indeed it was, milady. I was actually seeking an audience with you.
Tyrion beckoned while attempting to appear charming. Their pace softened as Tyrion caught up with her, so Jericho knew to remain several paces behind the pair as they walked.
It appears there will soon be a challenge regarding my marriage as well as the inheritance of Casterly Rock.
As far as my memory serves, those are all settled matters, my lord.
Perhaps not for much longer.
I understand. I will be sure to review the law before any legal challenge. As you are aware, the idea of marriage is quite foreign to me, my lord.
Tyrion sighed, remembering that Missandei hailed from the Isle of Narth, where marriage is nothing more than a foreign concept.
Am I to assume your recommendation would be for a dismissal of this challenge?
Lord Tyrion, I have yet to research, or even hear the challenge.
She proclaimed, obviously not realizing the favor Tyrion was asking for.
Of course, milady. Please keep me informed of any testimony you may become privy to.
Of course I will, Lord Tyrion.
Tyrion sharply stopped in his tracks as Ser Jericho halted sharply at his side.
My lord, did the conversation go as expected?
Unfortunately, it did.
Tyrion lamented. He longed for the days of a corrupt king's court, where favors and gold could buy any decision or any testimony. Tyrion never thought he would long for a court he could share with the likes of Varys and Littlefinger.